Good afternoon and welcome to our program on television, Africa Discourse on Independent TV. My name is Evan Sunokoge. Today on this show, we are going to be looking at the 79th edition of the United Nations General Assembly that, ended, is still ongoing, but our own president, came back some few hours ago. The Vice President, Kashim Shettima, was there. And of course, he addressed the General Assembly. A whole lot of things were talked about, were said concerning Nigeria. And we're going to be looking at all that today on the program, Africa Discourse. Well, to look at all this, we're so privileged to have Nowita Egbotako, an international conflict resolution expert and a human rights activist. Nowita, welcome to the program, Africa Discourse.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right, so just as we do here, we always ensure that we let you have the major headlines so that we are following on the program at this time. So we're going to see the major headlines one after the other. And of course, after that, we'll begin to hit the discussion. The headline one that we have at this time is Nigeria falling behind in Africa's electric mobility race. That's the big question. And it's going to be part of what we're going to be talking about today on the program Africa Discuss. Because we will see, as the program progresses on, we'll notice that why most nations of the world are now talking about 17-point agenda, talking about the sustainable development goals, the SDGs. I remember some years ago, let's say about 20, 25 years ago, most nations were looking at 30-point agenda. But as it stands now, most nations of the world, they have reduced this agenda, this aspiration, these things that they want to achieve, so to say, they've been reduced to about 17. So the big question we're also going to be asking on this program today is, where is Nigeria as a member of the United Nations, or where is Africa, a continent that will have almost about 52 members of the United Nations? So where are we in the space of all this time? We're going to be looking at all of that today as we move on. The first headline again is Nigeria falling behind in Africa's electronic mobility race. That's the big question, headline one. So if we have that, we can see it now. Headline one is Nigeria falling behind in Africa's electric mobility race. That's headline one. Then also we have AFC Itana partner with partner to build Africa's first digital economic zone in Nigeria. All right, so this is the first headline, is Nigeria falling behind in Africa's electric mobility race. Now, what you are seeing here now is an electric vehicle. Most nations of the world, let's say China to be specific, more than 50% of the vehicles you see on the streets of China today, they are all electric vehicles. So where is Nigeria? Why Nigerians are still grappling with fuel, the inability of most Nigerians to buy fuel in their vehicle, whereas most people in other nations, they have moved on. So remember I talked about the sustainable development goals that most nations have moved on with. So right now, nations of the world talk about 17. Why some nations in Africa, even Nigeria, we're still looking at 30 of these development goals. So headline one is Nigeria falling behind in Africa's electric mobility race. That's the big question there. Then for headline two, we have AFC Itana partner to build Africa's first digital economic zone in Nigeria. That's the headline two. AFC Itana partner to build Africa's first digital economic zone in Africa. Then for headline three, we have South Africa's stance on Palestine opens questions after apartheid and history. That's the first, the headline three there. South Africa's stance on Palestine opens questions about apartheid and history. Now, in South Africa, very recently, we saw whereby there was a kind of attack. It's something that still worries a lot of persons, that we still have such situation in Africa. South Africa's stance on Palestine opens a question about apartheid and history. Then for headline two, we have Rwanda limits funeral sizes due to Marburg virus outbreak. That is one big issue in Rwanda today, the Marburg virus that is tearing the nation apart. Why we still have issues like the the virus, the COVID, the virus, the Mpox virus and all that. But in Rwanda, we have a Marburg virus now tearing Rwanda apart. So Rwanda limits funeral sizes due to Marburg virus outbreak. Then we have at least 6 killed by bomb blast in Somalia. That's headline 5, the very last one now. At least 6 killed by bomb blast in Somalia. That's the headline number 5 that we are following now. All right, so let's see if we have the video now whereby the vice president, had to address. Okay, that video is not ready. So when it's ready, we'll let you see, have a look of that so that you can relate it to what we're going to be talking about today on the program. Now, Nawita Igbutako, you're welcome one more time. The United Nations 79th edition of the General Assembly, they've gone through the first phase of the meeting, and most head leaders of the world, most leaders of nations of the world, they've addressed the General Assembly. And you and I know that anytime you have the General Assembly, leaders of nations of the world come and give issues, tell the General Assembly the status quo of their nations and all that. So we're happy that our own Vice President Kashim Shettima was also there. But the question that we tend to look at now is the one that has to do with the way other nations of the world has moved on. We're talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. They've moved on now, they've reduced it to 17. A nation like Nigeria, we're still looking at about 25. The Vice President mentioned it. He talked about the armed banditry in the Northwest. And of course, he also talked about additional poverty and all that and all that. So where are we in all this, Nawita?
Well, Nigeria, where are we? The issues are very familiar. I touch on some of the issues in one of my works where we are a call to reclaim Nigerian state. It's a book I author, one of my books, it's on Amazon, it's trending. Where we are, to align with your question. Where are we in Nigeria? Where are we in the Committee of Nations? For me, we are nowhere. Because of bad leadership, because of unfocused perspectives coming from Nigerian leaders. Nigerian leaders have, presented themselves as monstrous anti-people, monstrous anti-people in their, disposition to Nigerian people. What I'm trying to say is that Nigerian leaders have not been fair to Nigerians because Nigeria is sitting on the bottomless pit of minerals. What don't we have? We have the we have the population, we have the resources, we have everything. What is the problem? Why are we not there? Talking about Millennium Development Goals, why are we still lacking behind? It's very clear. Nigerian leaders have not been sincere. We've had leaders who have been parochial and selfish, who are promoting their own, agenda, selfish agenda, self-preservation, instead of promoting the preservation of the Nigerian people. We see leaders who have made corruption an issue to subjugate the people. We meet leaders who have refused to let the institutions work. Nigerian institutions are not working. One of the basic institutions that is not working in Nigeria is the electoral process. The electoral process is an issue because the electoral process is supposed to throw up fantastic leaders, cerebral leaders that will take Nigeria to the next level. But the cabal, the forces that control what happens in Nigeria, they have simply refused to let the right caliber of character to emerge at this, on the scale of leadership. So we have Nigerian leaders since 1960 that have been anti the people. That's the fact of the matter. 1960, we saw what happened. We saw what happened during the general elections. We saw how the First Republic was truncated. We saw how the Second Republic was truncated. We saw how you saw the forces at play. And it is unimaginable that Nigeria, after how many years of independence, we are still where we are. And let's quickly say, look at China quickly. China got independence in 1949. Nigeria got independence 1960. How many years? Difference. Say 11 years. Difference. But today, China is a superpower. What is the problem with Nigeria and Nigerians? The Chinese, when they rose in 1949, I remember one of the speeches given by Mao Zedong, the revolutionary leader that took over power in October 1949. He said, today, China has risen. China will never go down again. That's an extract from what Mao Zedong said, one of the greatest leaders that came out from the Chinese experiment. So what vow are the Nigerian leaders made to take Nigeria out of poverty, to take Nigerians from the seemingly protected issues sinking us? What have they done? What are they doing to take Nigeria to that level? They are doing nothing. For me, the Nigerian leaders are the biggest problems that we have, because they are not interested in developing Nigeria. Since independence, we've not had any development plans. You must be focused. You must have development plans. And how can you have development plans when you don't have the right leaders? You don't allow the right leaders to emerge. For instance, in 1979, after the bastardization of military rule, when democracy came, 1979, it's quite unfortunate. It was a Shehu Shagari that emerged in 1979. When you have fantastic leaders, terrible leaders, even the presidency was zoned to the north, to the northern axis. We have the likes of the late Matama Sule, one of the best brains from the north. But because the cabal that control Nigeria doesn't want the best to happen, they prefer to bring out a third-class personality. So what happened to Nigeria with Shehu Shagari? Corruption was an issue. Shehu Shagari and his likes, they made Nigeria into a bonfire. Nigeria was burnt down in the name of maladministration. That what brought the military. After the military, in 1999, what happened? An Olusegun ambassador that was part of the ruination of Nigeria. Ambassador was head of state in 1976. After Murtala Mohammed was silenced via counter coup. It was an ambassador that emerged in 1999. Where did the ambassador take us? Where are we? The best characters are not allowed to emerge. Third-class characters are the ones that manipulate to power, so that the cabal can manipulate such personalities. In such countries, in such societies, you cannot progress, because your best is not in the cockpit of political power. You need to put the best candidate, the best character, the best leader, the best material. After Mao Zedong in China, you have Zhou Enlai, you have Deng Xiaoping, you have, name them. These are leaders that stood down and said, we must take this country to the next level. I'm citing China because China is a challenge to us. We don't have between just 11 years difference, 1949, 1960. So where are we? Okay. In China, you have one of the best architectural display in China. China is a superpower. China and China that was 11 years above Nigeria is the one controlling the whole African continent now. The other day they were in Benji. What are we talking, Evans?
And the other day we went there too.
What are we talking? We talk of a Nigerian situation whereby leaders have consciously retarded the country. It is sad.
Okay. All right. So
it is very sad.
If that video is ready now, we can let you have a tick. If the video is ready now, we can let you have a tick so that you get to see the Vice President at the last edition of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, in the United States. We are looking at some of the points that he talked about. Now, there are 10 points, issues that the Vice President talked about. As a matter of fact, it is also referred to as the presidential, speeches. But for the fact that the Vice President was there, so we'll just narrow it down to the Vice President, Kashim Shettima. Now, first and foremost, the Vice President, mentioned the issue of call for deepening multilateralism relations. I think that was where the Vice President talked about the need for African nations to have, a very good relationship. He also tried to extend it more into the United Nations. The need for nations of the world to have a very robust relationship. The call for deepening multilateral relations among nations of the United Nations. Then he also talked about the criticism of nationalism. Yes, the criticism of nationalism, he talked about that. Then the permanent United Nations Security Council seat for African nations. Yeah, that seems to be one major thing that most African nations have been interested in. Remember last week here we talked about it, whereby the United States seems to be in the forefront of that fight now for Africa. But there is a caveat to that. There is a condition, there is a catch. And the catch is that you can be a member of the United Nations Security Council, but you're not going to have any veto power. All right, so we have that video now. So you take it, let's have a look, whereby the Vice President addressed the United Nations General Assembly, the 79th edition of the United Nations General Assembly. Let's take a look.
Mr. President, as you assume the leadership of this august assembly, our world is confronted by profound moral questions that will require more than the habitual remarks from this elevated podium to resolve. These are questions about the ultimate purpose of our organization, the United Nations itself, and how it can remain relevant and resilient. It is with this sentiment that I convey to you the warm and fraternal greetings of my countrymen and women, and to congratulate you on your assumption of the presidency of this assembly. Let me assure you of the full cooperation of my delegation in discharging your honorary responsibilities during your tenure. In the same vein, I wish to extend my appreciation to your predecessor, His Excellency Dennis Francis, for the many remarkable achievements recorded during his stewardship. It gives me particular pleasure to commend His Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, for his commitment to the cause of peace and development and the democratization of the United Nations to reflect the need to correct the historic injustice that has been done to Africa. I am also delighted to note the steadfast support given to the Secretary General by our own sister and compatriot, Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General, while sharing the burden of leadership and responsibility in leading a complex organization like the United Nations. Mr. President, the theme of this year's General Assembly leaves us in no doubt that there is still work to be done to bridge the gap between the aspirations and the realities confronting our world today. It also underscores the need to remind ourselves that the United Nations stands for inclusiveness, anchored on the tripod of peace, sustainable development, and human rights. Today, these pillars of our organization are threatened. They risk being broken by the relentless pursuit of individual national priorities rather than the collective needs of the nations that are assembled here today. While commitment to multilateralism offers us the surest guarantee of global action to address the existential challenges we face, singularity and nationalism are undermining the aspirations towards a peaceful and collective resolution of such challenges. From last year's summit, and indeed from previous years, we have carried over the numerous challenges of terrorism, armed conflict, inequality, poverty, racial discrimination, human rights abuses, food crisis, hunger, irregular migration, piracy, global pandemics, hyperinflation, nuclear proliferation, grinding debt burden, climate change, and a host of other vexations. The continued manifestations of these challenges testifies to our failings rather than to any lofty achievements on our part. Billions of dollars are being committed to the prosecution of wars and the planning of the embers of conflict. Yet, we always recoil from bringing out the resources we need to build peace and to deliver life's necessities to people. The question of governance is at the heart of our problems and also the solution to them. We recognize this in Nigeria when on 12th June this year, we celebrated a quarter of a century of unbroken democratic rule. We are no less proud of this achievement than the fact that during the last 2 decades, a sustained process of democratization has swept over Africa. However, the return of unconstitutional changes of government and forceful military takeovers in some countries.
All right, thank you one more time. The program is still Africa Discourse on independent television. It's the Vice President Kashif Shettima at the ongoing of the General Assembly of the United Nations, the 79th edition in New York in the United States. Now, the Vice President is back home. He came in some few hours ago. Now, Nwutai Butako, like what we said a while ago, that 10 issues that the Vice President talked about. He talked about the need for call for deepening multilateral relationship. That's the need for nations of United Nations to be related, collective, collective interaction and all that. Then he also talked about the criticism he warned against the way some nations try to pursue self-agenda, which you may not blame it in nations now, but again, that is also against the objective of setting up the United Nations. Remember, we said it here that it was after the Second World War that the need arose for United Nations to be. But the way it appears now, some nations are leaving that objective apart and pursuing their own selfish, agenda. Then the permanent UN Security Council seat for African nations, the Nwutai Butako. I think this is the major interest now of most African nations as it stands now. You want to pick it up from there again?
For the permanent seat?
Yeah, member of the permanent seats at the Security Council.
I think Africans, they deserve to have a seat. Permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council, so that they can be properly carried along. Their voice can be heard properly. But the way the word is structured, the way the clauses, the statutory clauses that establish the United Nations Security Council give veto powers to the big five, China,
USA,
the United States, France, Britain, Russia. Yeah. So that alone shows that all animals are equal. Some are more equal than others. So for me, all this talk about permanent membership of the United Nations is those diplomatic gimmicks, as far as I'm concerned, because it will not change the economic status of Africa and Africans. It will not change the military influence of Africa and Africans. It will not change anything, because the superpowers are at work. The superpowers are pursuing selfish agenda. In international relations, which I'm an expert, I know that national interest is the main thing, is supreme. It is national interest that are taking China to where China is. It is national interest that are taking America to where America is. So all these diplomatic gimmicks and pontifications, it just to carry Africa to look as if Africans wanted to be carried along. But I challenge Africans to look inward. How did America develop? How did China develop? How did Russia develop? I have the facts. This country, even in 1917, when Soviet Republic came about, they didn't have electricity. They didn't have television. In Soviet, even radio, they don't have it. When the communists seized power in 1919.
That's the present-day Russia.
Yeah. But the leadership, they took action. Industrialization, that was the first thing Vladimir Lenin did. the leader of the Russian Revolution, industrialization process of the whole Russia. As today we are still battling with electricity problem. So for me, the talk about permanent seat, talk about being member of the Security Council, shouldn't be an issue for Africans. So because it's a yearly ritual. They go there to make long speeches. They come back and do something else. What is wrong if Nigeria lead Africa? If Nigeria has placed Nigeria where Nigeria should be, should we be begging? Should we be begging or soliciting? Should other countries be continuing not to enter the United Nations Security Council? China did not beg to enter the United Nations Security Council. Yeah,
but this time, it is not as if it is any of an African nation that is begging.
It's more or less like begging.
Yeah, but
let's give it to them. Even they give it to them, what will it change? It will change nothing. The maxim that reigns supreme in international politics is national interest. If you joke with your national interest, you're at your own peril. Africans have joked with their national interest. That's why Africa is where we are. Remember, many African countries have been there in 1960. Where are we? Where are we? We are nowhere. When I started, I said, when we're talking about where we are saying we are nowhere. Because Africans have not been disciplined. They've not disciplined themselves in the heart of governance, in the heart of political leadership. Corruption is an issue, Evans. Most African leaders are not focused. For me, if Africans are put as members of the Security Council, it will change nothing.
Okay. All right. So
that is my position. But I rather challenge Africans to look inward. You know, find a way to be in control of their resources. Africa is where Africa is because the West don't want Africa to go out of the poverty trap. It is designed. Imperialism is at work. That is the fact of the matter.
Okay.
Imperialism is an issue. Nuclear is an issue. But African leaders, because they don't allow the best guys to emerge, all these tech-class leaders, is the president leaders of Nigeria. I know the first-class character that run Nigeria. No, it's a question I'm asking. Yeah. For me, the present leadership in Nigeria are not first-class materials. Okay, it's my opinion.
We'll take a short pause now. Don't forget the program is Africa Discourse. When we return, we're going to continue from where we stopped, whereby the Vice President addressed the United Nations, the ongoing edition of the UNGA 79th edition.
Undermining the aspirations towards a peaceful and collective resolution of such challenges. From last year's summit, and indeed from previous years, we have carried over the numerous challenges of terrorism, armed conflict, inequality, poverty, racial discrimination, human rights abuses, food crisis, hunger, irregular migration, piracy, global pandemics, hyperinflation, nuclear proliferation, grinding debt burden, climate change, and a host of other vexations. The continued manifestations of these challenges testifies to our failings rather than to any lofty achievements on our part. Billions of dollars are being committed to the prosecution of wars and the planning of the embers of conflict. Yet, we always recoil from bringing out the resources we need to build peace and to deliver life's necessities to people. The question of governance is at the heart of our problems and also the solution to them. We recognize this in Nigeria when on 12th June this year, we celebrated a quarter of a century of unbroken democratic rule. We are no less proud of this achievement than the fact that during the last 2 decades, a sustained process of democratization has swept over Africa. However, the return of unconstitutional changes of government and forceful military takeovers in some countries of the Sahel underscore the fragility of democracy when it is not backed by economic development and sustained peace and security. It is this fragility, rather than the milestone that democratic governance has achieved in Africa, that should matter most in our deliberations at this and other high-level segments of the 79th session of the General Assembly. While we are for all possible changes of government, We can also recognize the impatience in cities and villages as a sometimes slow and grinding turn of the wheel of democracy. Our people need employment. They need decent livelihoods. They desire good and affordable education and health care for their children and families. They need to live in healthy, safe, and secure environments. They need hope, and they need opportunity. They desire to live in peace and tranquility, to pursue whatever gives them happiness and contentment. When governments fail to deliver, the people are bound to question the utility of democracy and other ideas.
All right, thank you one more time. Yeah, the Vice President again there addressing the General Assembly in the United States. Now, Onowita Butako, I think that's what we saw is more or less of a story of success. In other words, what the Nigerian government has achieved so far, But again, is also, I don't know, the way some people see it now is also a more or less a kind of a way of also begging that, look, like what the Vice President said now, that our people needs employment and all that. Now, in all this, where can we say the problems are? These problems that we're talking about now, are they self-inflicted? Or it is as a result of the global interference of issues around the world that seems to be affecting Nigeria and Onowita Butako?
The problems that we have in Nigeria are self-inflicted. Because there's no progressive leadership. There's no coherent, focused agenda from Nigerian president since independence to take Nigeria from the dungeon of poverty and underdevelopment. Since independence, have you seen any coherent, consistent, periodic program of national development?
Yeah, but what about our elections? I mean, the Vice President talked about it, that there has been a sustainable democracy. In other words, whereas we're having a situation in other African countries, military
democracy,
into power,
with
but
democracy.
in Nigeria, it hasn't been like that. It's been a government, a democratically elected government, handing over to another one, Onowita.
For me, we have in Nigeria is democracy my foot.
No, you cannot say so.
No, it's my opinion. I say democracy my foot because the democracy has not brought anything to the Nigerian people. Where are we? We started with where we are. Where are we? Is that the progression? Has it brought any development to Nigerian people? Where is the state of Nigeria and Nigerians now? You say democracy. What is the meaning of leadership? What is the meaning of governance? If the government cannot take care of the people, what is the meaning of political leadership? If you cannot take the bulk of the people from poverty. Today in America, the issue of employment is an issue. Even as the election is coming, there are radical figures that is coming out about employment. Oh, it has gained 5%, 10%. But Nigeria here, the Vice President went there, for me it's a jamboree. Jamboree, because you have to take charge of your own country. You have to have an agenda to develop yourself. For me, it is infuriating that Nigerians, as of today, still go to the United Nations General Assembly and still be talking all sorts of long speeches. It is infuriating to me. It is sitting. It is unfortunate because we have everything in this country to develop. What is democracy? If democracy cannot make fuel, which we get at the backyard in Niger Delta here, 15 naira per liter. When you have cabal, we have conspirators at the highest level of government conspiring and manipulating the prices. Even we saw that with Dangote coming with his refinery. The mafias at the NNPC, they are the one trying to strangulate Dangote so that the price of petrol will not go down. What kind of government is that? What kind of leadership is the present government telling us? Tinubu is the minister of mineral resources, petroleum resources. So can the president put down his foot and say, once it's done the way it should be done?
Okay.
And we have oil in our backyard. Is it not leadership failure, Evans, that all this while our refinery has not been working, that we take our crude oil here, take it to abroad, go and refine? Is that not insanity? So the problem in Nigeria is self-inflicted. Even democracy we're talking about, for me, there's no democracy. What we have is a facade.
There is
what do we have is phantom. Democracy that people are not important. Democracy where that people's voices are not, they will not have their say. After elections will be rigged. Incredibly. Right, elections are rigged.
Yeah, no, let's...
what are we talking?
Yeah, let's leave that.
These are the issues that are working against Nigerian people, working against Nigeria and Nigerians.
Yeah, I want to look at, the last time we came, we talked about, the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, that point blank told, our own president that if it has to do with debt forgiveness, that is a no-go area for China. But here again now, one of the points that the Vice President talked about at the General Assembly was the need for debt forgiveness and, of course, the call for financial reform and debt forgiveness for Africa nations. Then he narrowed it down particularly to Nigeria. Now, this is a situation whereby we keep on asking for loans and opportunities given for us at the General Assembly. We keep on begging to write off those loans. I don't get it. What is really going on? I wanted to speak to it.
Today, as far as I know, the Tinubu government is dancing to the tune of Bretton Woods institutions.
What is that?
Bretton Woods, International Monetary Funds, that are the ones using, it's a financial empire that is subjugating Africa and Africans. Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, is a financial empire. Yeah, quote me.
But we'll take that as your own opinion.
But that's the fact of the matter. Has any country gone to IMF and come back clean and sane? They will dictate how you spend your money, the money you borrow. They will dictate what you will do and what you will not do. The Tinubu government has swallowed the policy of IMF. Hook, line, and sinker. That is why the dollars are crashed. Have you not, imagine it? How did the dollar crash so easily? Within a few months that Tinubu came to power, something happened. Remember, there was this credibility issue with Bola Tinubu when he wanted to be Nigerian president. The issue of it to be accepted globally. So we have a president that is even insecure. That is my it's my opinion.
It was cleared of that now. We saw how the story went.
Which story went? When the judiciary was used to manipulate the process. What I'm saying is that we don't have a leadership that is pro-people. We have a leadership that is being run by some elites. This elite, they are interested in their own welfare. Government for the elite, by the elite, and for the elite. That is our situation. Look at Nigerian situation. They've taken water. Before, we used to have water boards everywhere. Yeah. No more water board. You see what I'm saying? Even the electricity is cutthroat. People are giving estimated bills and all that. All the reform they wanted to do in the power sector is still dangling. It's still uncertain. Electricity supply is an issue. You understand? Now the oil, which all of us know petroleum we use to do one or two things, has been taken away from the people. If you have a government that is pro-people, Evans, Nigeria will not be where we are. Because there will be sanity in the process. Where was the president? Who is the minister in charge of petroleum resources? When a cabal was dictating to Dangote how you serve, to the detriment of Nigerian people. Today we buy fuel at 120 or 150. That to me is insanity.
1,050, 250.
That is a problem.
All right, so
it is a problem because we don't have leaders who want to get it right. This government, have you seen any coherent agenda that he has for the people? There's no coherent agenda. There's no blueprint. There's no blueprint. If there's a blueprint, Tinubu will not go to Benji to go and listen to Jinping telling him that will not there will no debt forgiveness.
Okay. Now,
so these are issues.
Let's take the last lap now, the last take of the Vice President addressing the UN General Assembly. Let's see that.
Our confidence in democratic rule and constitutional order by paying more attention to the needs and aspirations of the people, rather than paying lip service to human rights, sustainable development, and peace. We need the sustenance of democracy, not just the form. We cannot build durable societies with the threats of terrorism, banditry, and insurgency growing in our countries and regions. Indeed, violent extremism remains an existential threat to both national and international peace, security, and development. We are making concerted efforts to contain and roll back this threat. The high-level African counter-terrorism meeting hosted by Nigeria in April 2024 and its outcome, the Abuja Declaration, promises to provide solutions to the challenges presented by terrorists and insurgents. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, climate change is a driver of insecurity, which also poses a veritable challenge to sustainable development. A few weeks ago, large areas of my country were inundated by seasonal flood waters, including one of our largest cities, Maiduguri, in the northeast. Other parts of Nigeria also experienced similar tragedies, occasioning the loss of lives and property. We need not remind ourselves to remain faithful to the implementation of the commitments that we all gave voluntarily at the various COP meetings. Failure to do so is merely to postpone the inevitable. No country is immune from the effects of climate change. It is better that we cooperate and collaborate to meet this ever-increasing challenge rather than remaining in our shells, waiting for the inevitable to happen. A common challenge requires a common solution. Nigeria stands ready to meet our obligations in terms of mitigation and adaptation measures nationally and regionally, with the active participation of other countries and international partners. Mr. President, conflict resolution is the main reason why the UN exists, but the task of prevention becomes all the more difficult when conflict becomes normalized, when even the condemnation of violence and civilian casualties and calls for a ceasefire are somehow regarded as controversial. As we emphasize at the Abuja high-level ministerial meeting, we must renew our focus on conflict prevention. Indeed, addressing the root causes of conflict is often the first step towards providing long-term solutions. Clearly, some of the root causes of conflict are social in nature, including poverty, hunger, ignorance, inequality, and exclusion, as well as other forms of injustice. In the Sudan, other parts of our continent and further afield, foreign actors are exerting.
All right, thank you so much, the Vice President there. Now, Nowichai Butako, you saw the Vice President talking about the issues around climate change, and he said that it can be likened to the adage that goes that the wide wind that comes and beats all. No one is separated, no one is removed. That's the way the issue of climate change is today in the world. Now, he also talked about the issues around security and all that and all that. Now, let's take it up from climate change. Now, recently we saw what has been happening in major parts of Africa, whereby farms, settlements are taken over by floods and all that.
Flooding.
Now, about 2 years ago, we saw the Lagdo Dam issue effects in parts of Nigeria and all that. Now, this idea of members of United Nations, nations of United Nations, turning their eyes away when one issues affects one nation, because the essence of being a member is the idea that an injury to all, an injury to one is an injury to all. But United Nations members, especially advanced countries, are not taking to this. Nowichai Butako.
Well, they do show interest.
With their aids.
What do you expect them to do? because they are the greatest generator of this industrial waste that affect climate.
Yes.
Because they are industrialized nations. They have concentration on heavy industries, you know, chemical industries and what have you. They do. They produce atomic energy. They produce heavy waste, and they pollute. They go to the moon. They go everywhere, and so they are the major generator of climate change. They are the one. What would they do? That will affect
the climate.
Affect the climate. So, what do you expect them to do? What they do? What do? Would they, but Africans, they don't have a frontal voice tackling the issue of climate change, because the West are not doing enough, you know, to pay. We call it reparation or something. The West are not doing enough to, you know, to compensate Africa and Africans, because they're the major generator of this climate thing. And we don't have a single voice. If you say, okay, if Africa and Africa come with a policy that we will not allow you to do this in Africa, if you don't do this, you know what I mean? With a single, the AU, for instance, have a frontal, coherent agenda to tackle climate change. I think the West will have a rethink. If you say, well, we have this, we will not let you do this until you do this and do that. But that is not done. The West are still having their way. You know, the climate and change meetings that they go.
Okay.
They still having their way. So who do you blame? You still blame African leaders. African leaders, they will not be able to sit down and articulate on this issue of climate change. Okay. And we even expect Nigeria, okay, this one that the Vice President has gone to United Nations is a begging jamboree. What is wrong?
Is to address the UN.
It's an annual jamboree.
Annual ritual.
Yeah, ritual, and nothing comes out. He leaves that podium. The next few minutes, that paper is seen as a trash.
Anyway, let's look at the thing.
What is wrong if the Nigerian government should not have a coherent agenda for climate change for
Now,
Africa?
the last question now, just with 1 minute. Now, the theme, leaving no one behind. In other words, leaving no member country behind. That's the theme of this year's General Assembly at the United Nations. Now, the question we asked now is Africa as a continent, are they ready to be, to follow the United Nations so that they will not be left behind?
They are not ready. How can you say, for instance, let's give Nigeria as a case study. When the best material, first-class material, is not allowed to enter the cockpit of leadership. It's a first-class material that will articulate issues, that will have a coherent agenda, a consistent development plans to take Nigeria and Nigeria out of poverty. But Nigeria is a replica of what most of it happen in Africa. Just if you look around in Africa, in South Africa, in this, in that, it's a replica. We don't have genius, political genius, leaders that are ready to take their country, to confront. We don't want third-class characters who cannot stand tall in international politics. You cannot survive. So what happens in national politics is that you must assert yourself. How do you assert yourself? You develop yourself. You will have something that they will keep asking for. And Africa have those things. Nigeria as a country will have those things. The problem is the leadership the management, the managerial abilities of Nigerian leaders is more or less zero. They don't have agenda. They don't have a blueprint. That's the problem.
You cannot say that they don't have an agenda.
Do Nigeria have blueprints for Nigerian people in the name of petroleum products? That the Nigerian president will appear on his first day of inauguration, that first OCG is gone without consulting with the people? Is that the leadership? They have a coherent pro-people agenda? Is now put Nigerian people in crisis, in torment, and turmoil? Let's face reality. So the problem we have in Africa is problem of leadership. And agreed, there are manipulations from the Western flank, imperialism and all that. We allow them to use us.
We'll say thank you.
So until Africa and Africans and Nigerians wake up like China. China woke up on October 1, 1949. Mao Zedong told the whole world, said China has woken up. We will never go down again. Nigerians should fight and Africans on the day we wake up and say Africa will not go down.
All right,
The
so-
West will not do it for us. We'll do it for ourselves.
Yeah, no, we always enjoy your time on this show. Very thank you. No,
Thank you. Because these
I know at
issues
times these issues
are
can be very
touching,
emotional. But
look at where we are.
We must understand that Nigeria is on a destination, and of course, Africa as a continent is also on a destination. So we want to say happy independence one more time to esteemed viewers out there. So tomorrow, by the special grace of God, October 1st, the country is going to be 64 years of independence. So we have to celebrate our independence, whether you like it or not. As a Nigerian, you must celebrate. So Nowita, until the same time next week on this program. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
That's the program today, Africa Discourse. Same time on the same program next week. My name is Evan Sunukogi. Good afternoon.